Okay, so this week's Parsha is Parshas Chukas, which speaks about Parah Aduma, which is like an unknown and untapped topic, and I want to tap into it. I want to tap into this topic of Parah Aduma, of Tuma and Tara. It's sort of like, well, what does that have to do with our lives, and what does that have to do with our day-to-day? But I think it has so much to do with our relationships, and it has so much to do with our lives. And like we try to do is always to see how things are practical and relevant to our lives. And we're going to get to that, how this is perhaps one of the most important tools in our relationships, any relationship, because every single human being is made up of so many different relationships, husbands and wives, and parents and children, and friends. And in a certain way, the Parsha of Chukas speaks to relationships, and we'll get to that in a second. But before that, I want to just speak about the concept of Parah Aduma. The Torah starts off saying Zot Chukat Torah. This is the chok of the Torah. And why is the story of Parah Aduma considered the chok of the entire Torah? If you want to tell me Zot Chukas Parah Aduma, I understand. But the first question that the Mefarshim ask, why is it called Parah Aduma? Why is it called the chok of the entire Torah, this mitzvah of Parah Aduma? But the second question, more specific, if you look at the Medrash says that the example of a chok, the example of a mitzvah, again, mitzvahs are categorized into three different categories. We have mitzvot that are mishpatim. Mishpatim are interpersonal relationships. You go to the Beis Din to know what happens if an ox gored your cow or whatever it might be, right? And then we have edut. Edut are the mitzvot, are the commandments that are commemorative. They are zecher l'tzias Mitzrayim, kiddush, and tefillin and tzitzis. They remind us that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. They remind us that we're Jewish. They remind us that we have a relationship with the Almighty. And then there are mitzvot that are called chukim. Chukim are the mitzvot that we don't really know the reasonings 100% behind them. We could try to imagine, try to understand, but we don't fully understand them. Now, example of the chok, the ultimate chok in the Torah, is Zot Chukat Torah, is the Parsha of Parah Aduma. Now, why is it such a chok? Why was it important that it was a chok? Out of all of the mitzvos, this is the one that the Medrash brings down, that Shlomo HaMelech said, Echkema vehi rechoka mimeni. I've been very wise, but yet it is very far away from me. I don't understand the significance of Parah Aduma. So why is Parah Aduma so important that it's a chok? And even more, what really bothered me as a kid, I always thought that I was very smart. I thought that I understood something that Shlomo HaMelech didn't understand. Why? Because I learned Chumash with Rashi. And what does Rashi tell us? Rashi reveals to us the secret of Parah Aduma. And he tells to us, what does Rashi say? Mashal leben shivcha shetinef paltin shel melech. Amru tavo imo v'tekaneh chatzoah. Kach tavo para v'techaper ala egel. Says Rashi. Rashi says, they imagine there is a maidservant in the palaces, in the king's palace. And she's one of the maids over there. She cleans up. And one day she brought her child to see her at work. The child wasn't feeling well. She had to go to work and she couldn't send him to school. So she brought him to the king's palace. And then the kid, who's a little baby, he's 1 year old, a year and a half. And then so who is the one who comes and cleans up? The mother comes and cleans up. Her job is to clean up the palace. And definitely if her child made a mess, so she's going to be the one who comes and cleans up the palace. Says Rashi, that is the secret behind Parah Aduma. That the para, which is the mother cow, let it come and heal and clean up the mess of the baby calf. Where was there a mess of a baby calf? The mess of the baby calf was the Chet HaEgel. We just started Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. Chet HaEgel happened on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. So we understand why we have the cow. It's coming to be mechaper the Chet HaEgel of the calf. But then we really have to ask another question. What does one have to do with the next? Chet HaEgel happened in the desert. Parah Aduma is making whoever touched a dead body tahor. It's metame, the mason. What does one have anything to do with the next? Why is Rashi bringing the two together? And he's saying, oh, I've understood and I've uncovered the depth of what Parah Aduma is all about. So I want to try, together with you, to try to understand what is Tum and Tara. What is Rashi teaching us? That the Parah Aduma is mechaper for Chet HaEgel. What does one have to do with the next? And when we understand that, hopefully, we'll also be able to understand something very fundamental about our relationships and our interactions within our relationships. So we have to understand what is tuma, what is impurity. It doesn't mean that somebody is dirty. Somebody could be very clean and washed his clothes many times, but he went to the levaya and he becomes tameh. He touched the sheretz and he becomes tameh. There is a variety of tumah. There's the tumas leda and tumas nida and tumas keri and tumas zav. There's a whole different tumah and taros. Seder taros is one of those untouchable seders. A sixth of shas is we're scared to approach it because it's sort of like this scary concepts of tumah and tara. So I want to just break it down to the core of understanding what is tumah and what is tahara. So Tuma, the Mefarshim explain, and we have to understand where is the first time that we're sort of introduced to the concept of coming out of Tuma. And that will help us understand that the Gra always says you have to find the first source that it appears in the Torah. It'll help you understand what it is. So Tuma is always referred to the lack, the he'eder of life itself. Whenever we come in contact with the lack of life, life itself is tahara, is holiness, and whenever there is the disconnect from life, the loss of potential of life, that's when we find that is considered tumah. Obviously, the prime example of that is when somebody was alive and then now he's no longer alive, and therefore there is tumah. But it's not just that. We find that there's tumah when a woman gives birth. She becomes tummy. Why does she become tummy? Because she actually had life inside of her, and now that life is no longer with her. It is alive by itself. So therefore, a woman becomes tummy. And if she had a girl, so then she's more tummy because there is double potential of life. It's her life that she had a child within her, and then that child has the potential of bearing more life. So therefore, there is more tumah, and the tumah lasts for 1 week longer because there is more potential of life. Also, the tumah of nida and the tumah of keri from a man are the potential of bringing life into this world. Every single month, in theory, a woman who is a grown woman has the potential biologically to bring a child into this world. If the potential is not met and it ends up breaking down into the menstrual cycle, so then there's the potential, there's the loss of the potential of life, and that brings upon it tumah, impurity, because we had the potential of life and the potential of life was lost. Now, why is that? Because we have to understand what life is all about. Life, we see this in the beginning of creation, and that's really the first time that we find life and not Tuma itself, only the pasuk that's after that. It says, Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et ha'adam afar min ha'adama vayipach be'apav nishmat chayim vayi adam lenefesh chaya. HaKadosh Baruch Hu imbued within us a living soul. Now, the living soul is our ability to speak, but it's not just that. It's when we understand what life is our soul is the source of life. And that source of life is always, the soul lives forever. It's only when the soul joined the body that there is the opportunity of something to be lost over here. But when Adam HaRishon was created, Adam HaRishon was actually created with the potential to live forever because he was so connected to his neshama that he shouldn't die at all. I don't know if you've ever met an old wise man, a sage. Now you look at him in his eyes, you see the physical body, but you look deep into his eyes and you understand there's something very spiritual over here. And then what happens when someone is nifter? So then the eyes, they shut. And even though the eyes might be open, but there's no more life in them. Right now, where we see the neshama, where we see the life, the livelihood of somebody is actually in his eyes. It used to be when you looked at Adam HaRishon, all you saw was a light. All you saw was a neshama. All you saw was connected to living. And if you looked carefully, you could see a little bit of a body. Nowadays, when you look at a person, you see a body. And if you look closely into his eyes, you could see that there is life in there. You could see that there's a neshama in there. It used to be that it was totally the opposite way around. Now, if you look in Bereshis, in Parak Beis, when Adam Arishon is created, there's something that seems always bothered me that is out of the ordinary. Because Adam Arishon is created, that's in Parak Beis Pasuk Zayin. And then it says that Hashem created Gan Eden, and that Hashem created the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, and then it says that there is a river that left Gan Eden, and it split up into 4 different heads, and it went all the way around, and it speaks about the 4 different rivers, and then it stops, and that's it. We never go back to speak about those rivers. Why? What are those rivers doing over here? Now, the Kabbalists say something very fascinating. They say that Adam Arishon was created. When he was created, it was all life. There was no death. There was no Tuma in the world. But then, the tree of life and death, the tree of knowledge, were created in the Gan Eden. The moment the Torah introduces those 2 trees, which are the potential to sin, the potential to eat the forbidden fruit, and then to bring death onto mankind, therefore there's the potential of Tumah coming into this world. Therefore Hashem says, I need to create a river that goes out of Gan Eden and splits up into 4 different rivers. The world was created with Asara Ma'amars, with 10 powers of speech, and there are 4 rivers. Each one of them has those 10 powers of speech. Altogether, it's represented by the number 40. The Kabbalists teach us, and this is something that we know. What is a mikvah that makes us tahar? A mikvah of 40 sa'ah. The number 40 always represents a new beginning, the new beginning of a child. Arba'im yom kodem yetzirat havlad. We announce that there is a bat kol. Nineveh is going to be destroyed in 40 days. The Mabul was for 40 days. Moshe Rabbeinu was up in Har Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. The Meraglim came into Eretz Yisrael, it was for 40 days. The number 40 always represents a new beginning, a new starting. It's an opportunity for a new life to come into this world. And that's why we have the 4 rivers that come after the Gan Eden. Because when we have the opportunity to sin, that means that we are connecting to our body. The moment we connect to our body, we're no longer connecting to our neshama, to our soul, which is our source of life. And that's when Tumah comes in. And that's why, if you notice, anything that is more removed from life itself has more potential for Tumah, which are the kelim that become tameh very quickly, and you can never make them kosher. That's kli cheres, that's made out of dirt, out of the adama. It is totally removed from life itself, and therefore it is the most tumah. A plant that grows, when it's attached to the ground, it doesn't become tameh. It doesn't become tameh because it's still alive. When you remove it from the ground, it's not. It could become tameh if there's water on it, right? If there's water on the fruits, then the water could become tameh. Then it facilitates it to become tameh, but it doesn't actually become tameh. But an animal, while it's alive, it can never become tameh. And the moment it dies, it becomes tameh, it becomes a nevela. And a human being, I would imagine that he's the most tahar when he's alive, because he's the most alive, the most connected to his neshama. And only when he dies, there's a bigger lack of life, and therefore there should be tumah. But it's not like that. As human beings, we actually become impure while we're still alive. And that's because we have the potential of bringing life, and we lose it. But it's not just because of that. It's because within our life, we a lot of times live based on our body. And let me explain what I mean by that. And this will explain to us also Parah Aduma, and this is something that's gonna it blew my mind when I finally understood Pshat in this Rashi, what it means. Okay, what does it mean that the Parah Aduma is going to undo what the Cheta Egel did? So it says the Medrash says, we all know the famous Medrash, we teach it to our kids. When Bnei Israel stood at Ma'amad Har Sinai, what happened to all the people that were blind? What happened to all the people that were sick? What happened to all the people that were crippled? It says that everyone stood, and everyone, kol ha'am ro'im et hakolot, and everyone heard the noises of Hashem. So there was nobody who was deaf, there was nobody who was blind. Everyone was able to stand strong. Everybody was healed. Now, what does that mean that everybody was healed? What that means that at that moment in time, the entire Jewish people were able to connect to their spiritual self much more than their physical self. They were able to connect to their neshama, which is the source of life itself on the highest form, and not to their body, and therefore they miraculously healed. And not only that, says the Medrash in Shmos Rabbah Lamed Beis, כשעמדו ישראל בסיני וקיבלו את התורה, אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא למלאך המוות. הקדוש ברוך הוא tells מלאך המוות, על כל עובדי כוכבים יש לך רשות. You still have permission granted on all of the nations of the world. ועל אומה זו, but on this nation, אין לך רשות בה, שהם חלקי because they are mine. כשם שאני חי וקיים, כך בניי קיימין, שנאמר בהנחל עליון גויים, וכתיב כי חלק השם עמו יעקב חבל נחלתו. The Medrash tells us that when we stood at Har Sinai, not only were we healed, but we were able to reach the level of Adam Arishon when he was created, before he sinned, that he was going to live forever. Because Am Yisrael, when we stood at Har Sinai, we connected to our neshama in its highest form, and we were now ready to live forever. But then how does the Medrash end? Says the Medrash, ולא רציתם, אלא חיבלתם במעשיכם ואמרתם לעגל, אלה אלוהיך ישראל, ולכך אכן כאדם תמותון. Bnei Yisrael did not want to stay on such a spiritual level, or they couldn't stay on such a spiritual level. And in a certain way, they sinned by the sin of the golden calf, and therefore they lost their life, their potential to live forever. And therefore, what brought about the Tumah, specifically for the Jewish people, what brought about the impurity, our ability to die and to pass away, was actually that we sinned at the sin of the golden calf. And therefore, Chet HaEgel was the catalyst that brought upon death and the Tumah of death, specifically onto the Jewish people. Now, not onto the Goyim. The Goyim never reached the level of Har Sinai and then dropped from it. So they stayed in a lower level, the level of the original sin of Adam Arishon. And here there's a fascinating Orach Chaim HaKadosh. He uses this analogy. He says that imagine that you're taking out the garbage. Or let's be more accurate. Imagine you ladies are telling your husbands to take out the garbage, right? So they're taking out the garbage. Now there's two ways. Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, imagine you take out a bag full of garbage. But imagine you take out another kli that is not full of garbage, but it's full of the leftover honey that you had. You had honey, and there is still honey stuck onto the food or onto the plastic bowl, and you're throwing out that plastic bowl as well. Where would the bugs attract? So the bag of garbage attracts some bugs and flies, but a bag of honey, of Silan sauce, whatever it is, that it's something sweet and it's left over there on the bowl, so that's for sure going to attract all of the bugs. Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, this is the analogy for the Tumah of a Jew that passes away, as opposed to the Tumah, the impurity when a non-Jew passes away. Since a Jew, his entire life, he is much more connected to life itself, because V'atem advekim b'Hashem Elokechem Chaim kulchem hayom. What is the source of our life when we're connected to our neshama? Which means that we're connected to the word of Hashem, which means that we're spending time talking about Torah, about mitzvos, about values, about the midos of Hashem. Those are the things that represent life. Those who cleave onto Hashem, chaim kulchem hayom, that's considered life. So that was a life full with honey. When that life passes away and the neshama leaves, and all that is left is the body that stored that kedusha in it, so then all of the tumah bugs come and latch onto it. Whereas on the other side, if there is a non-Jew who didn't have that connection to that higher level of spiritual connection, of dveikut b'Hashem, of connection to spirituality, so when the neshama goes away, yes, there's still tumah there, but it's a lower level of tumah. And therefore, a mace that is non-Jewish is not metame on the same level. It might be tumah mid'Rabbanan, and the Kohanim try to be makbid, but it doesn't have the same level of tumah as a Jew that passed away. So therefore, now we understand a little bit more of what the Chet HaEgel has to do with Parah Aduma. Because Parah Aduma is coming to be metaher, to fix, to make pure what was impure. And the reason why we have impurity in our lives, the reason why there is death in our life, the reason why there is the lack of life, which is the source of what Tumah is all about, is because we sinned at the Chet HaEgel, and therefore comes the Parah Aduma and fixes it and makes it better. Now we have to understand, how does it fix it? Why is it a chok? Why is it important that we don't know the significance of it? And that's how it undoes it. Now, here is the important lesson that I think very much applies to our life. See, in the Torah, there's a lot of mitzvos that we don't know the reasons for. But there's a lot of mitzvos that the Torah gives us the reasoning for. There are mitzvos that the Rishonim, the Chachamim in the Gemara give us the reasoning for. And then there are mitzvos that the Rishonim, right, the Tamei mitzvos, the Sefer HaChinuch and the Rambam, they try to give us the reasoning for understanding why it is we're doing specific mitzvahs. Now, it's very important for us to be able to know why it is we're doing certain mitzvahs. Now, for the most important reason why it's important is because it's good material for the rabbis. If they don't have what to say and what to explain, so then why would you need a rabbi for? So we need to understand the reasoning of why it is we do the mitzvahs. But more importantly, it gives us a sense of understanding what Judaism is all about, what values it represents, and how I can better understand what are the mitzvahs that I do. But with that, there's also a big danger. There's a risk of giving somebody a cause and a reason. Don't do this because, right? A lot of times the kids say, I don't want you to do this. No, you're not allowed to go to a friend. You have to go to sleep on time. But why? Right? But why? Why can't I do it? Why can't I go to my friend? Why do I have to go to sleep now? The kids are always asking these questions. Why? And we ask ourselves, why? Why does God want me to do this? Why does God want from me? So a lot of times it's important to give the reasoning. But sometimes giving the reason sets us back. The Gemara gives different cases of how when a reason was given, don't read next to the nair because you might tilt it. That's the reason. You're not allowed to read next to a candle because you might tilt the candle. And then there's a Gemara, the Gemara quotes a story where Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha was reading next to the candle, and he thought, maybe since I know the reasoning, so then I'm not going to tilt the candle because I know why you're not allowed to read next to it. And then he was about to tilt the candle, and he said, how amazing are the words of Chachamim, that it doesn't matter what level you are, you have to follow the mitzvah even though you know the reasoning. In the Torah itself, we have this, right? One of the famous mitzvahs is the mitzvah of a melech, a king. What's a king? He's not allowed to have too much what? He's not allowed to have too much horses because they might bring him down to Mitzrayim. He's not allowed to have too many wives because they might sway his heart. He's not allowed to have too much money, right? All of these things. What does Shlomo HaMelech say? Shlomo HaMelech, the one who couldn't understand Parah Aduma, what does he say? He says, if it's only because you're not allowed to have too many wives so that they shouldn't sway your heart, don't worry, it won't affect me. Now that I know the reasoning, a lot of times when I try to give my children a reason why you're not allowed to go to a friend or why you have to go to sleep, you have to go to sleep because tomorrow there's school. So they always have 5 reasons why my reason is not good. Very good. Tomorrow I have to go to school, but I don't really, and I'm allowed to go sleep late, and I don't need to sleep so much. But the moment you start reasoning and giving an explanation for the rules, there's an opening for a discussion. So a lot of times, and we find this in the Torah, Shlomo HaMelech failed because of that. Bnei Yisrael failed because of that. The Chet of Adam HaRishon, the reason why death came to this world was because we were given one commandment. One commandment, don't eat from the tree of knowledge. Why? Because if you eat it, you will die. That was it. There is a reasoning. The moment there was a reason, though, said the Nachash, the snake, goes to Chava, and he says, you're not allowed to eat it, you're not allowed to touch it. He pushes her on the tree, she touches, she doesn't die. He says, you see, the whole thing is made up because there was a reasoning, you're not going to die. And therefore, they brought death onto themselves and onto the world because they thought, I'm not allowed to do it because of the reason, because of the consequence, because of the punishment. That's not the reason why Hashem said, don't eat from the Eitz Hadas. And the same thing happened with Bnei Yisrael. They're waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu. They want another leader. They want to understand. We can't do Hashem without a leader, without understanding. So therefore, they make an Eitiel. Now we have to understand, when they reached Maimed Har Sinai, the reason the death punishment of humanity was removed from them is because they said 2 magical words. What were the 2 magical words that Am Yisrael said at Har Sinai? They said, Naseh v'nishma. We will do and we will listen, which meaning we're willing to do even though we didn't hear yet. we're willing to do even though we don't fully understand. And this is where I'm coming to in relationships. A lot of times in relationships, we need to understand one another. We need to understand the reasoning behind one another, the reasoning how our wives operate and how our husbands operate and how our kids operate. But here comes an important lesson that I learned. A lot of times, my wife might ask me, and gentlemen, please tell me if you agree with me or not. Sometimes my wife might ask me to do something, and I may not understand at all why this thing is so important. But for her, it's important. Now, I don't understand why it's so important for her because I'm a man and she's a woman, and she's explaining to me why, or she's just saying, just do it. It's important to me. So when there is a good relationship between husband and wife, when there's a good relationship between parents and children, the fact that it's important to my wife is enough of a reason for me to do it. The fact that it's important to somebody that I have a relationship with, that itself strengthens the relationship more than if I was to do it because I just understand why it's important to her, right? Sometimes I'll tell my kids, oh, you have to do this. So it's true when we understand it. If I understand what my father asked for me, so then I'm more motivated to do it. Or maybe I'll argue and say, oh, well, I don't agree with the reasoning. But imagine that I don't fully understand why my father asked me to do something or why my wife asked me to do it. But I value our relationship so much that if it's important to my father, I'm willing to do it, no questions asked. If it's important to my wife, I'm willing to do it, no question asked. That itself shows how important our relationship is. In a certain way, the fact that I'm following a rule that I don't understand shows that my relationship is not just about, that I have a real relationship, that it's not just about the rules. It's actually, I have a relationship, I cherish that relationship, and that's why I'm willing to go out of my way to do it. When Bnei Yisrael stood at Har Sinai and they said, Hashem, Nasa v'nishma, we're willing to get married, whatever you tell us to do, I'm ready to do it. The moment they said that, they reached the level of Adam Arishon Kodem Achit. And then they sinned by the sin of the golden calf, and they said, oh, we want a God, Eitiel, we need an intermediary, we don't understand, why are things happening? The moment we started asking all of these questions, that's when we sort of lost that connection to life. Our connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a connection to the neshama that's inside each and every one of us, and our willingness to dedicate our lives. Yes, we have all of the Tamei HaMitzvos. We have all of the reasonings that the Chachamim give us, that the Sefer HaMitzvos gives us, that the Sefer HaChinuch gives us, that the Rambam gives us. A lot of different reasonings why we do so many mitzvos, and they're here to help us better understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what the Master of the universe wants from us. But there might be certain things that we don't understand. What happens when there's something in our relationship that we don't understand? So then we have two options, either to say, I don't understand my wife, and since I don't understand, I can't do this anymore, or to say, I don't understand my wife, but I value my relationship so much that if this is important to her, so then it's important to me. A lot of times people struggle with a mitzvah that they do not fully understand, and that's because they don't really have a relationship. Now, it's very hard. It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So it's like, if there is a strong relationship, then you value the mitzvos that you don't fully understand. And you say that is what strengthens my relationship. If you don't have a relationship and all you're focusing on is on the chukim, so then you're like, oh, I don't understand what Judaism is all about. You cannot start a relationship by focusing on the things that you don't understand about your wife. You start a relationship by focusing on all the things that you love about your wife, that she's amazing, and it's so much wisdom here, and so much beauty here, and so much great feelings, and so much. And that's really how our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu starts. When we start teaching newcomers about Judaism, we start with the mitzvos. We start with Shabbos. You feel Shabbos. You understand Shabbos. You're like, this is the biggest startup for humanity. You start with the mitzvos that make sense, that you can understand, that you can comprehend. And as the relationship grows deeper, we could start maybe learning about Peter Chamor, or start learning about Parah Aduma, which are mitzvos that we may not fully understand how they work, but we understand that if this is important for my father, if this is important for my wife. So then it's important for my relationship. And that's really what this Parsha is all about. This Parsha is all about Tuma and Tara, is understanding that if the more I'm connected to the neshama, to the shorish neshama, I'm more connected to life. If you're connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have a strong relationship with the Almighty, so then you're alive. Then you have everything. But the moment that relationship is sort of lost, there's the lack of life, there is the loss of life, the loss of potential of life. So that's when Tuma comes in. And how we refresh ourselves is the concept of going into the mikvah. Going into the mikvah, the 4 rivers, is the 40 sa. It's a new beginning, a new cycle, being born anew. It's like going into the womb, right? A baby's in the womb, and then he comes out. It's a new life. It's sort of the new creation of a new life within ourselves, is choosing to purify our bodies, and in a certain way purify our souls, the way the Rambam speaks about it at the end of Hilchos Mikvos, that Tuma and Tara, the concept of Tara, is not just a magical water sprinkle, but rather it's the Tahara, the purification of one's soul and connecting to one's soul. And that's how one becomes more Tahar and more holy. So this week's Parsha, even though it seems like it's speaking about all these mystical topics, and we try to jump in to explain what Rashi means, that the Parah Aduma should be mechaper for the Chet Egel. Yes, it's because the Chet Egel is what brought about the death onto Am Yisrael. And the reason why it did it is because we started asking questions. We weren't willing to have that relationship without all of the questions answered. And therefore, that's what brought about the Tuma. Our avoda during this time period is called Zot Chukat Torah, is to understand that from Parah Aduma, we can understand that in a certain way, the entire Torah is a chok. But since we have that relationship, I don't need to fully understand everything, but I'm doing it because I understand 95% of the mitzvos, that we have all of the Tamei mitzvos. The fact that I don't understand the 5% strengthens my relationship, and in a way allows me to understand that even the 95% that I do understand, I don't fully understand. And that's okay, because it means that I have such a strong relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was a pleasure sharing these words with you. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, Mirza Hashem, same time, same place, 5 o'clock on our weekly Shul Zoom, and I'm looking forward to it very, very much.